All right, so we are going live. Just give it a moment here to boot up. And I was hoping if anybody in here, once it actually shows up, let's wait till somebody shows up because I want to make sure the people in the other room know. Let me actually go on there, folks. Just give me a moment here and let everybody know to come into the other room. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Hold on just a second here. We're going to go live in just a well, we are live now, but please check the other video. We're live in another link. Okay. So, all right. Hello. Yeah. Yeah. We got great. We have 10 people already. Excellent. So, welcome to the show. I'm James Rink. It is August 14, 2020. And before we actually begin, I'm going to do one more thing because I'm going to notify the audience members on Facebook to join us because inevitably somebody is okay. So that has been done. Great. So now we can proceed. So welcome to Super Soldier Talk. Today we have Rebecca Rose with us. And Rebecca has a really fascinating story. She's been on Mars, on the moon, and she's had a lot of interactions with the Draco. She's also been in a cybernetic body, and she'll certainly be sharing some of these experiences as well as some of her, I guess her life story here. Of well, how about we just go ahead and bring her in? And hold on a second. Let's see here, Rebecca. Let me unmute you. Hopefully, it's gonna. Can you, or maybe you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Great. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, good to be here, James. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. And thank you, audience members, for joining us. So again, if you have any questions for Rebecca as we're going on here, go ahead and throw it into the group chat. And also, would somebody be kind enough to go into the other scheduled interview? I'm having a lot of trouble with YouTube. I'm trying to sort it out, but just the other schedule, just go in there and let everybody know we're over here. Okay, so Rebecca, yeah, you gave me, let's see here. Let me go ahead and read your bio. Rebecca is a multidimensional galactic experiencer working as an energy intuitive, seer, and channel. As a lifelong abductee, she was taken to work in a dark government programs as a child. I guess that includes Monarch and Montauk. A path that was facilitated by her father's top secret military clearance. Through abduction and trauma-based mind control torture, she was used in hybrid experiments, off-world battle testing, genetic harvest, and as well as mind-to-mind interface, gathering intel from various extraterrestrial races. She was first sent to the moon and then to Mars, where she developed into a cybernated clone and weaponized asset. Her service continued on Planet X, where she was owned by the Draco. Rebecca's strong meditation practice and devotion to spiritual development are what supported the return of her memory and putting the pieces of her life back together. And we're certainly going to go into that later, how we can do some memory recall. After her awakening to her deeper mission, intuitive abilities, and psychic vision, Rebecca also realized she had a vast array of helpers from many different realms assisting her. To this day, Rebecca relates to benevolent galactic family from other races, including an indigenous mother and father from a past life in her healing team. So I guess these are like astral beings.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll go into that in just a bit. Her integration, wellness, and memory retrieval is ongoing. She now assists others in recovering from her own anomalous experiences. So her website is Rebecca Rose Barfoot.
It's Barfoot, yeah.
Okay. Excellent. So anything else you want to add to that bio?
Oh no, that's plenty.
Okay. All right. So how about we just go ahead? Let's go from, I guess we'll start from the beginning. So your father helped brought you into this program. So what was his role, and how was he instrumental in I guess putting this on your life path?
Well, I mean, truthfully, I probably put it on my life path before I came in, but but I kind of point my finger there. Down's a Zeta hybrid himself. Like if we talk about DNA, star heritage kind of thing, and he the first thing that started happening was that he made a deal with his Gray family so that the Grays, the Rigel Grays, so that they could take me. He had a perceived debt with the Grays, and he kind of used me to pay it off. I also believe through his work with Lockheed and the military, he was mind controlled himself. So there's that other piece that he, before I was born, he was working in top secret compartmentalized programs with the Army, and then in the Navy, and then in the late 60s started working for a company that was bought out later on by Lockheed Martin, and that went on for, my whole childhood. He was working in black. And I didn't even know this until, so you guys, he passed away in March, which was when I had, like, the memory flood started really coming after my dad died. So he functioned in a way as a handler. So what happens when your handlers and programmers die? For me anyway, it always seems to mean memory retrieval. But I didn't know this. I was talking to my father, like, he was in hospice, and this was probably over the winter before he died. And I was trying to dig around before he passed away about what the heck he was doing all those years. I didn't even know about the top secret clearance. I had no idea. Like, I was living in a dark vault my whole childhood, not even knowing about that. But I had found after his death, going through his papers and stuff, some documentation of his notes about basically mind control technology and controlling mass psychology using implants, and something to do with, I said, angstrom spacing of neurons in the brain, and how to, it's the word I might also use is like psychotronic. So sending in signals from external locations. And he did work in satellite communications, let's say. So I believe he was working himself. All his projects were in research and development. They would give him a project, say, here's your budget, go figure it out. And Dad had no degrees, nothing, but he was downloading information from the Zetas. He would often say to me, as we were in hospice talking about his work, I don't even know how I did have that stuff. And I said, Dad, were you getting some other sort of help from somewhere else? He said, yeah, probably was. But he had mentioned also, going back and forth from CIA headquarters and doing projects for them, and also NASA. So, all the notes I took sort of secretly as he was talking, the last couple months of his life pointed at some pretty suspicious things. He himself talked about working in a cage in the basement of the facility, which I never got to the end of that story, but there's a lot of anomaly there with my father.
All right. So did he work for the NRO, the National Reconnaissance, I guess, organization or office?
Not that I'm aware of, but there's many things I'm not aware of. He was a man of top secret. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, because anything had to do with satellite telemetry, typically what they were highly interested in was not stuff that was going on planet Earth activity, but more per se turning the satellites into space and seeing all the ships that are moving around, not telling us what they're doing. So do you think he was had intimate knowledge of ships, secret space program ships, vessels?
I think he had a lot of intimate knowledge about very esoteric things going on, for sure. That he always seemed to, we would get into kind of in a certain mood, especially if he'd been drinking, he'd start talking, and he knew so much, like how orbital trigonometry and how the satellite, he would tell me things that I can't even articulate now about all the satellite web around our Earth and going out into space and all this. I'm like, I'm lost, but I know you know things. So sounds similar to what you're saying, James.
So did he actually go to, when he went to work as a child, would he go to like a military base, or was it a private contractor, or was it the Pentagon?
By then he had completed with the Army, and then had started with the private contractor, later to become Lockheed, and also was going back and forth with the Navy all through the 70s into the 80s. So he would go on business trips for the Navy top secret. I don't know what he was doing, but in the meantime, he'd come back and work from the office at the facility in town. So
you said the Navy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because the The SSP people call the U.S. Navy the old Navy, making fun of like the department, you know, the clothing store. Anyway, okay, so I don't know if he ever brought up any jokes like that, but anyway, so the point is, what about as a child? Did you ever get any visitation from any beings showing up?
The Greys, you know, as long as I can remember, James, I had really scary dreams of being paralyzed and mute. I mean, this goes back to when I was like 3 years old, as soon as you start having, you know, memory. And I would wake up in my bed, I couldn't get away from whatever it was, and I couldn't move, and I couldn't, trying to scream. And it took me a while to admit what was going on. And it's the Greys, often accompanied by insectoids, who were a lot of times just doing genetic, what I call, or they call, genetic harvest, and then certain kinds of monitoring. And that went on for a long time. And of course, there's already, you know, the Greys sort of lubed the work so that, you know, I could eventually, I believe, be taken off world. So,
yeah, I just try to show some images here. So, as far as these Greys are concerned, do you recall actually being on their vessels when you were a child, or even as an adult?
I don't recall being on them, being shown, just saucers that are, they're kind of typical, like old schooly sort of flying gray saucers that aren't particularly, you know, elevated looking per se. Yeah.
Okay.
More I remember a lot of them visiting and doing things that I wasn't always, I mean, you know, if they're really doing their job, you shouldn't even know they're there.
Right. So why do you think they were visiting you?
Well, I think it goes back somewhat, you know, the predisposition for that, because they kind of had a hall pass from my father. Like I said, he had a perceived debt to them. And I think whether he did it or not, he was maybe coerced, maybe not, into saying, okay, take her. And then this is aided and abetted by, I think there's some kind of embedment there with his work. You know, once you're in top secret, you, in a way, sign away your entire life, your family, anything, and your mind to that the very top secret work, I think, entails some of that, whether you're aware of it or not when you get into it. And that seems, there's a weaving together of those two stories that I, to be frank, am not entirely clear about. And it may have had also, like I said, a contract that I made before I came in to really experience a lot of darkness, than to resolve it and bring things more toward the light. Like you can't, how I see polarity, at least from soul vantage point, is that how could I help restore light and unity on this planet if I really didn't understand the deepest workings of the belly of darkness? Yeah. So I don't know if I answered your question about the Greys, but it's still sort of mysterious to me. Well, what I do know too is that when I was being taken for the longest amounts of time, for example, on Mars, I was also being taken by a Light Alliance ship. And I think they kept me, in a sense, because I've been through so much. We all have, you know, who've been through these programs, but to be as well as I am somehow, I know that they were taking me aboard the ship and protecting something of my most basic essence. And then using me as a double agent. You know, if I'm working for the light team and I'm working for the dark team at the same time, that's interesting.
Yeah, that does seem to be a common theme, and certainly in the SSP, is that especially those at Montauk, a lot of us were abducted so many times by different beings, and they were all trying to get their hands on the intel that was coming out of Montauk. Mm-hmm. And would you like to share a little bit about some of your Montauk memories?
Oh yeah. Gosh, hold on, let me
go. First of all, Penny Bradley shared that her that I guess there was a CIA that targeted her and brought her into Montauk. And then you mentioned that you think your father may have also been subcontracting for the CIA, correct? Or what was CIA?
Yeah. Oh, he mentioned lucidly to me while he was
Yeah.
at the end of his life of going
So
back and forth to their
yeah.
headquarters.
And additionally, they shot her up with Draco DNA, and you also have a strong connection with the Dracos. So do you think that you were perhaps even in the same program as Penny?
It's possible, Penny has also mentioned that. I've heard that about, I don't know, wherever it comes from, I have very strong Draco, what I would call benevolent connections. I have, since my father died, had my Draco self has come in and become embodied through me. Like the first time it happened, I was sitting in meditation and I felt a Draco being to my left very strong. And of course I went, oh shit, what do you want? And it came and it sat inside of me. And this is not unusual for me as a very fluid light medium and an energy intuitive. This happens, but it was not dark. It was light, and it's actually come in to take my power fully back and to make itself known in my life. So yeah, I think the Draco DNA, whether the CIA is injecting us with it or it's natural, you become a target if it is natural, but it's so desirable for things like weaponizing soldiers, for work in outer space. It's very, very desirable. I'm sure you've heard this from others too. Is that common in your interviews, or do you know?
Yeah, well, a lot of us were shot up with reptilian or Draco DNA. Typically, you need the aggression, especially if you're being brought in as a super soldier.
Yeah.
But they also found that humans' DNA was actually more effective fighter than reptilian. So what they've been doing is just mixing the best of the best to get this hybrid elite cyborgs.
That's what they're doing in space, is mixing the best of the best, man. That's what, and the Draco were masters of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so humans, on the other hand, even though we may not have the same physical strength as a Draco, when we're fully 12-strand activated DNA, when we have that, like the Leaksadadin or the beings down at bottom of the sea in Ashland, which is left of Atlantis. Yeah, so if you got like DNA like that, yeah, you've fully activated, so you can go into a 0 point, and I was told it was called golden form, where you could basically levitate, walk through walls, teleport, stop time. So there's some pretty, and I guess that's what goes in the Kruger runners. But anyway, so going back to your Montauk experience, tell us a little bit more about what you do recall.
Yeah. Well, I remember lots of torture experiments that related to time, but also, I mean, the first thing is, before they're getting you into the time stuff, they're really breaking your mind into a million pieces. And you all know that watching this. I remember being in cages a lot, and times in isolation in the dark, sensory deprivation, and a lot of sexual abuse happening within that context. And that was so that when anybody, because you're left in isolation, and I'm 6 years old, living in a dank little dark thing by myself. When anyone comes in, you are so overjoyed, you do not care what they do. If they're going to sodomize you, if they're going to take you into satanic ritual, if they're going to stick you in, someplace with electrodes all over your head and interrogate you, whatever, it doesn't matter. So that's definitely a control mechanism. But I remember a lot being in like cages piled up on top, only 2 or 3, but within them, like in more of a brightly lit lab setting. And I remember, I remember a lot from that. And it's, I don't know how much you want me to go into it. It's pretty, I mean, it's dark, but I think it's needed to be spoken of so that these things can clear. I mean, I remember being like, there would be like a lottery. I remember being on the bottom level of the cages, and these, a guy in, it's like 70s polyester pants and these brown shoes with a buckle, and he's walking back and forth, and it's like a lottery, like they're drawing a number. And when that happens, you don't know if you're going to get ice cream or be executed. And they would execute people as a means of instilling great terror, of course. And that's the biggest, mind F you could possibly have, is not knowing if you're, because ice cream was not something you'd be given, right? I mean, that's like, oh, wow, we're on vacation. And I also remember they were using satanic ritual as a kind of technology to break the mind, which is kind of heartbreaking. So that's why, you know, I've been investigating more, how is satanic ritual used by the military in these kinds of programs as a technology itself, to, I mean, destroy people and take their life force energy. We would be taken out into the woods, and I mean, unspeakable things happening there, with, in the end, child sacrifice. First, we would be drugged and sodomized and then taken out to the woods at the base. And completely, at that point, you don't even know what's going on. I mean, you don't know whether you're the kid on the altar being sacrificed or someone watching, or if you're watching it from above, like out of body. And that's all in a way to disturb the sense of what is real. And of course, there's so much mental reversal process going on within Satanism. They're reversing the creation codes. They're reversing the sacred geometry of life and inverting it to serve the death principle. So there's so much to it. It's a very, it is a very high technology, as horrible as that sounds. But it's interesting how the military has capitalized on that. And I can also share that that memory field is opened up only in recent time. In July, I don't want to mention his name, but the main programmer there might be known by other people on here. His initials are MA, and his vision came to me. I was given by my guides, my healing team, the information to put sacred geometric forms back into my left eye, which was harnessed and manipulated and wired to stuff during my programs. While I was doing that, an image came up of this man he was a well-known military colonel, Army colonel. He was also head of a lot of psyops, and using developing psychological warfare for the military. He also happened to be head of the Temple of Set. He founded the Temple of Set in the early 70s. But anyway, his image came in, and I go, I don't even know who that guy is. I had to look it up, pointy eyebrows guy. And a couple days later, this whole memory field opened up, James, and I was on the floor just like I get downloads like that. It's like a data packet in my mind, or a zip file's been closed up, and then suddenly it unzips and all the memories are falling out. And I cannot really predict how that's going to go or what exactly triggers it. But he was the main one there doing the satanic ritual that I recall, the main programmer. And then what I learned too is that, interesting what I said.
I don't mean to trigger you, but
yeah. Thanks. You can remove that.
Sorry.
Go James. Thank you. And everybody, thank you. I just didn't want to say his name. I don't want to go there.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It's interesting, just briefly, but what I shared about my father's death opening up memory fields, I realized, and remember, I had to look up this guy's name. I didn't even know who he was, which is how buried this was. Phenomenal to me. That is exactly the time last month when things started to circulate on the internet that he had died or transitioned from his physical form. Doesn't mean they didn't clone him, but I thought that was really fascinating how my memory retrieval of these, just probably one of the most horrible memory fields that I have, opened right up. So I know I have more memory coming up as when other people die, and that's not shortly off in my future.
Okay. So here's a Draco, one of the white ones. The Royals, these are some reps. This is again drawn by Ken Bakeman. And, yeah, you can see these. So these guys are what, about 12 foot tall? Is that about right, or 14?
I mean, there's different. I remember a lot of them being only around 8 or 9 feet tall. I feel like it varies. Like there's differences amongst them. I mean, and as you're showing that here too, obviously. Yeah, and I see the way that her name is Tia, my Draco self aspect. When she first came in, she was, you know, typical green. And over time, as we did healing and integration work, she has become pure white and she has wings. And her energy is very stabilizing and equanimous, very settling, powerful, but not in a negative way. So yeah, great photos.
So this is a benevolent Draco. Apparently, I think about 5% of them are considered very loving and caring, even though they may look like that. I think the average.
They look scary. But
anyway, so these beings are real, and I mean, you could say they almost have like a kind of a gargoyle appearance, and they were certainly predominated at Montauk with the Thuban Draco. Which were involved in a lot of the sex rituals with the kids. They would shapeshift into a human child, and participate in the rituals. But as far as where you were taken and so on, it appears that these experiences took place outside of time, or like in a time bubble outside of our realm of time. So you could have been there for 40 years or 20 years. And they would have been re-aging you over and over between the ages of 7 to 12 or whatnot. Is any of this resonating with you as true?
I don't know. I mean, the time period, I don't think I was actually at Montauk for that long, but I don't know. I do know, James, that time is so slippery when we talk about all of this. I mean, it's like, and especially when we contemplate going off world, as soon as you're leaving Earth's orbit, time gets really different. And by the time, you know, I was out on Planet X, I don't even know if time exists. So I've wondered if I completed my work out there at the end of the 90s, is that just catching up to the now? Like, because I've had experiences like, oh, I have felt, and other people can probably relate to this, that I'm in some kind of a time loop at times, or there's a way that it's still going on. It could be a cloned effect, like there's still clones out there. But anyway, time is slippery.
Would you be willing to share maybe some of your experiences? Like, for instance, in the cages, do you recall what they fed you?
I don't have memory of food there. No.
Because typically they would put dog food in a bowl. Otherwise, they may just let us starve and put us back.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't think there was much luxury of meals there. I don't think they really cared. They wanted to keep some of us alive. I mean, and James, you know this. It's like so many of them died. We were expendable, disposable people.
Well, they were looking for the elite of elite, see who could survive the most trauma to take on to the next programming.
Exactly.
Which I'm assuming was probably Monarch. And I don't know, was that in your notes? Oh yeah, MK Ultra Monarch programming in cages in a time tunnel tube. You want to go into some of that?
Yeah, sure. The cages, I can talk about what I perceive as creating hybrid beings there within this project, where being in the cage and being tortured at intervals, they could then wed my DNA with some kind of extraterrestrial and splice it with, it's either adrenochrome produced from the suffering or an analog that also comes from the endocrine system, to then make a being that had the blueprint of my consciousness, but then could travel out transtemporally. So a transtemporal being, hybrid being, that would be used to investigate parallel timelines and future probabilities, and also the past. I mean, that was, you know, all about what they were doing at Montauk, beside the mind control. I remember one that was made out of my DNA and so forth, that was a tall, kind of almost like an elven type being. I want to say, just because of the ears, and lanky and tall and kind of lithe. Not like a warrior being, but this was a spy. And because of what does adrenochrome do? Longevity, the ability to go forever and not need a thing. It's a wonder drug, right? So splicing this into somehow the genetics of this being allowed it to go and go and go and live forever out in these long spans of, you know, talk about time and beyond time, 1,000 years out there, 1,000,000 years out, who knows, and it could still come back. Whereas if you send a human, it might not make the journey back. So kind of interesting. I mean, it's fascinating from a certain perspective if I withdraw myself from what they're actually doing and what their intentions are, and they're doing it to me, not someone else out there. The technology and the things that they're employing to do all this are mind-blowing to the conceptual linear mind based on, you know, Newtonian physics and linear time. So as far as what else, the time, I call it the time tube tunnel torture device. And I don't know if this came after the chair. I don't have memories of being in a chair, but I do remember being in a, from the inside, it feels like a coffin or an MRI machine, but outside it looks like a silver bullet. I mean, it's quite sleek actually, metal, and being stuffed into it, and my head being kind of electrified and being launched into, I want to say time, but there was another, they're accomplishing a couple different ends. They're exploring time, but they're also trying, as I understand it, and in the memories I have, splitting the etheric body from the physical body. And it's so painful, you just wish you would die. I mean, that's how I felt. And they would do this over and over and over, and I felt like I was failing, and they kept sticking me in it. It was like, it felt like I would just rather die than be put in this thing again. It's horrible. And they were seeing how far I could go, that means in space and time, but also before I blacked out and was no longer useful to them. So that corroborates what you're saying about like the best of the best. How much can they withstand before they're close to death? Or how much can we use them?
Well, often they would take us to death and then put us in the regen tank.
Put us in something to get us
like for instance, okay, here's a scenario. They would take 50 kids and then put them into, I don't know if it's a virtual reality scenario, but it's a scenario where there's zombies there. This is a recurring theme, and see how long they would survive. And usually, you know, the ones that survive the longest, all of them probably would die at one point, but maybe they didn't. So, do you happen to recall anything like that with zombies?
I don't. I do not remember that. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, and you know, James, I should say at the beginning of all this, you know, I'm still in the process of memory retrieval. It's not like I have all my story all tidy. Things seem to open up at, you know, just kind of doing something normal, and then I have a memory fall in. So who knows what will present itself.
Do you remember the Halo bed at the Waikiki Hilton, where they would take the kids down to the underground base? Or anything like that in any kind of hotel where they teleport?
No, I don't. What are you want to say a little bit on that?
No, not as not. I mean, Preston Nichols used to operate it, but okay. How about you? Do you have any memories about the trip seat?
No, that's what I was saying. I don't remember that. I do not remember that. What I was going to say, we're going to talk about cloning in a little bit, but this is related to the splitting of the etheric body from the physical body. And one of the ways I was shown that a clone might be created is through, if you take the etheric body of a being like myself, yourself, it is the exact energetic template of all your characteristics contained, as I see it psychically, in an energetic web, a light web. If you preserve that, you can grow a biological form on top of it infinitely. I mean, I don't know how many times, but it might be a way that cloning is accomplished. Now, was that part of what they were doing in my experiment that I mentioned? I'm quite curious about that.
Were you asking me a question?
Yeah, I just was saying, it's interesting when we get into clones, whenever, about how they're actually creating them. And that's one of the ways I was shown, or remember that happening.
So you recall being in the cloning lab or seeing one?
Well, when I described the time tunnel torture tube, and them splitting the physical body from the etheric body, was that one of their intentions, was to discover more about how cloning might be accomplished by separating the two, which should never, ever be done, ever.
Yeah. Well, they were doing that at one point. They would have put your soul energy into another clone body, especially if it was after the end of a 20-year and back mission in which your body was all beat up, and they figure it's just easier to create a new clone and put your consciousness back into it.
Yeah.
So I've actually got a drawing here. I think this was Penny who found this, or maybe Alana, but so this is a Kruger cloning facility where they would take your consciousness and put into another clone body. So the red or a blue colored goo is for regeneration, and yellow is stasis.
Mm-hmm.
So does any of that ring a bell to you?
Just the being held in stasis, yes.
Do you recall what color goo?
No, I don't have goo memories really. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. And but do you recall waking up in a clone body?
I remember having clone bodies. Do I remember the moment of waking? And no, I remember the moment of dying, but of some of those deaths and the confusion about where my consciousness might go at that point, not knowing where to go. Yeah.
Well, would you like to either, I mean, we can go into more Monarch programming, or we can continue going down some of the clone bodies you are in. What would you like to?
Well, all the cloning, when I say the cloning for me, it was not just as a human that you see with you now. It was always a cyborg. So they cyborged me and then they cloned that. And that happened on Mars. So that was where I became a cyborg rather than the moon. Moon was just kind of training and yeah. But and Mars was where I was the longest. I was there at least 20 years and it felt like forever. I think it was probably more like 30 years. And I was taken there when I was 9 and trained as on the land and in the sky in a couple different facets there. But the cyborging is then, once you create an asset like that with so much investment of money, time, and technology, to clone it then can, be used as currency and then traded to other races or whatever. I mean, it's kind of remarkable and a little frightening, as I felt some bleed through from other experiences that I think I was traded in the galactic slave trade off of the solar system. And I think clones can live a lot longer, but there's so many, and I think they also experience time differently. I can't explain the science of that. It's just something I can tell is true for me anyway. So I can't tell you, it's hard for me to differentiate between clone body to clone body. I don't think I always knew, did we always know when there was a clone and when there wasn't a clone? Or what, am I in the 15th clone or the second clone, or being owned by, operable in a couple positions at once as a cloned asset. And now that gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, certainly. So why don't you talk a little bit more about, here's a regen tank, but what did your body look like when you were on Mars as a cyborg?
Yeah. It seemed like when I was there, I'll back up a little or start at the beginning there, rather, that I was a kid, and of course they allowed me to age. As a child, before they cloned me, I believe, they had me training just psychically, interfacing with I just call it a killing machine. I mean, it's a creature, very high tech, that has claws and is designed as a weapon of war for combat, but I was interfacing with it from within it or remotely with my mind. That was sort of the basic training in Mars. And then it was after that, at some point, as I aged a little bit, not long after that, I can say that I work with my child selves that experience these things. And we call them inner child or elsewise, but I had one come to me, and she said she was cyborged in her head. She had all this metal underneath her skull, and through her forearm, and she just looked at me and she said, "Help me, can you help me?" Like, in a way, she was still out there experiencing something and she wanted to come home and be integrated. But they're part of what they were doing seemed to be actual implantation of metal in the body, mechanical. Like, if we talk about a cybernetic being, what is that? Cybernetic is a wedding man and machine of some kind. So I have biological components and also very high-tech computerized, if you like. I mean, we could talk about it in terms of artificial intelligence, but it's much more advanced than what we would be calling AI here on Earth, is my impression. And with off-world materials, and then also, you know, like more subtle types of implants in the brain and throughout the body and the energy field. So you have mechanical alterations, biological, and also chemical through drugging. But that's the best. It's hard to describe the cyborg other than it seems like a lot of metal and a lot of high tech going on in my head. That's not really my head. They stuck it there.
Well, how about we start off with maybe what did your suit look like?
Mm-hmm. I just remember, I mean, there was, when we were out, it seemed like a tight sort of form-fitting suit. When we were like above ground on the base, I don't remember like a color or anything to that. I don't remember wearing any kind of facial stuff to breathe. I mean, we were all adapted to be able to breathe the air and all of that. I remember being really blindingly bright out for sure. Windy. I don't remember too much about the suit or what I was like, a uniform or what I'm wearing. It changed over time, I'm sure, depending on the position I was in. Yeah.
Well, one suit that's used that comes up is some type of a bio suit that's skin tight.
Mm-hmm.
Typically a black colored, maybe like neoprene. And then when you put it on, it had these little tiny needles in it, and it prickled you at first, but then it like itched really bad, and then it sort of became one with you. With, I guess, the femto technology merged. Do you recall anything like that?
That seems like a probability. I do remember, I just remember the form-fitting kind of nature of it. And I actually remember being really hot. I know Mars, you know, people say, God, it's really cold there. I just remember being like, it's sweating all the time. And it could be because I was in a suit. I don't know.
Well, during the afternoons, it can get really warm, especially in the summer months.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
Well, the bay where I was located was near the equator. It's below the equator, like the facility where I was working from. Below the equator, not too far down in the southern hemisphere. So that might, you know, explain, like, even though Mars is farther away from the sun, I think the atmosphere is thinner. So it might create some effect of it being, feeling brighter somehow.
And do you remember seeing any kind of, I guess, trees or plants?
No, I remember being like, nowhere to hide. You're not leaving this place ever. There's nowhere. I remember lots of sand blowing dust all the time. It seemed kind of beautiful to me, but I wish I could remember trees. I certainly don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about any kind of other fauna or wildlife?
I just remember like, I believe probably spider being that killed me one time. But as far as native, yeah, just more benign flora and fauna, no, nothing. I don't remember water there really on the surface, like sort of cracked up puddles of dry pan, or the landscape looks like it was really watered at one time, but yeah.
So this is the crab-like spider. But you said you had an encounter with one of these creatures.
Yeah, I and a group of us, there's about 7 of us out there kind of patrolling on foot around the base. This was toward the end, you know, I'm late 20s, early, well, 30-ish at that point, and have been really trained to be on the ground. I remember we were out patrolling, kind of mundane, you know, but farther out from the base, kind of checking things out and seeing what was going on out there. And then over the rise, you know, amazing, there is hills and features. came, like, I kind of recall it just as this massive, big as a house mammalian thing, stinky, hairy, about, you know, like gray, chocolatey brown. And those guys were able to vaporize somehow. They had some kind of vaporizing technology as a self-defense to get away. But I had some, it was burning me inside, like it hit me with some kind of like being tased or burnt inside, like with a scalar energy or something. And I fell to the ground, and that's all I could remember, other than just lying there in the face down in the sand and not knowing whether I was alive or dead, because my consciousness was still alive, even though the body, I couldn't move. And the being, I think, was just, seems to be alone. I don't, it wasn't like it wanted to come eat us. It wanted just to be, you know, get away from here. Yeah, and that brought me to my question of like the consciousness and cloning, and when your clone dies, does it take a while, like, to find its way back to source consciousness, or is it coming back to my consciousness? It was very confused about what to do next. That's what I was confused. The I that was still in consciousness there. And so.
All right. I wanted to share some actually pictures. So this is from so some kind of life form plants on Mars. Mm-hmm. So I believe they're photoshopping this to look black when this is really green color. They're just using filters.
Right.
Out of it. They don't want people to think. Yeah. So, but here, this one, the Valle Marianas, which is in the tropical region on Mars. You can see here, this looks like the dunes, and you get over here and it's almost looked like they put a filter to make this green part look black, but in some areas it's still green. You can see right there some green spots.
Yeah.
And then if you come over here in this corner, there is a pyramid-like structure. Maybe if I can find it somewhere around here. But oh, here it is. Look, let me get this out of the way. Can you see this this pixelated? So that looks like some kind of pyramid around. And this I think this. Look, hold on a second. It gives you the scale right down the bottom. 10 kilometers there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a size. So that's about 10 kilometers right about there. Now, this is a lot of greenery. So do you, I guess I already asked you the question if you remember trees. So I guess you
I don't from now, you know, at this point, I don't have memory of that. I think other people have mentioned that, though. You know, it's not just what NASA shows us that exists on Mars or anything else for that matter.
Yeah. So there is certain so this is actually down at the bottom of a huge canyon in a tropical area. So this area may not even get much frost at night. But I just felt like I needed to share that.
Thank you. No, it's really interesting.
Okay. So as far as your squadron, do you recall any other beings out there serving with you when you were?
You know, Mars is a place, and I think that was revolving somewhat over the years. I don't think it was always the same people, let's say. Mars is where I remember the most humans. Like, it's not populated with so many aliens in my memory. There was a lot of sort of blank folks, human type beings there. Whereas on the moon, I remember, I'd say Nazi-aligned Germans, but basically Gray and Draco on the moon. So I don't have a lot of memory of working with other beings than humans on Mars right now. And there was so much to Mars. It seemed like it was endless training and refining. Like as a cyborg, they could somehow put me into a program that was digitalized, tweak me in the very high-tech way in 2D and spit me out in 3D, which is, you know, a little bit hard for me to wrap my mind around. And then some of the battles they would put us in were simulated, and some of them were real, and we really weren't able or supposed to know the difference. the difference, I mean, we were trained to kill. You're just supposed to be an asset that is trained to kill command on, that's it. But we could also be dying either, of course, in a real battle, in a simulation, and even in digital, like we could still be killed. And like I said, it was very strange because we never knew the difference, and that was part of it. You're not going to know the difference.
All right. Okay. And can you describe any of maybe your, as far as, how about your height, or was that changed at all? Or maybe did you look human as a cyborg?
I feel like I was on the verge, James. I know somebody once asked, well, were you still like female? And I'm like, I think at this point you're a bit androgynous and your sexuality is not necessarily, I mean, they absolutely want certain parts of your brain that is psychic. They want your genetics, they want your human DNA. Those are powerful, especially if you have star genes. It's not to say they want to do away with you, but I think there's a certain point at which it's more important to just be, this gender male female is like, I don't know, doesn't matter. They have so much at their disposal. It's disposal to create the being that they want. I think if they get the right genetic template and you can survive X, Y, and Z, they will find ways to use you, because again, at that point, they've invested so much into you. They're going to find a way.
Yeah, certainly. And cyborgs have huge teams of scientists and technicians to constantly maintain all the upgrades.
Yeah, I'm trying to sort out something here, which is I recall on Mars, after one of the many, interventions, let's say, that they were doing, or upgrades, two mantas sitting over me, like in a bright lit scenario, and they feel really benevolent, like they want to know if I'm okay. And I think that's interesting, if they were on the team that was altering me, that they still showed this element of compassion, like. Maybe it's just because, oh, we're gonna get in trouble if she dies, or whatever. If we damage the goods, but they seem genuinely caring, and I don't know, because I have also worked with benevolent mantids.
Is that what they look like? The mantids we're encountering?
Not not that four-legged butt thing. No. They have two legs. Two like bipedal, like you and I. Star formation had 2 arms, 2 legs.
Like this?
Where you at? Yeah, more so. Quite a bit more elegant looking, but yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, a bit more like that. They're green. I have a benevolent guy named Nemo who's been working with me a couple years. He's a mantid on my team, let's say, my personal team. But because I know the mantids are featured in a lot of sort of scenarios like this, because they're masters of working with frequency and certain kinds of technology that involve that. Yeah.
Was yours that look like this? So the eyes on the side?
They're more, a little bit more like that top. Yeah, a little bit like that top one. They're not quite, let's see, not quite like exactly those pictures, but pretty close.
Yeah. So usually the humans and the reptilians and the mantis were all at odds of each other on Mars.
Yeah.
So what is your explanation? Why do you think you were interacting with the mantids in a positive way? Here's another one. Another drawing.
Yeah, the eyes are more like that, in my experience. Yeah, I would say that it's hard to, when we talk about a race being all good or right, or like all bad, I don't know that always holds true, because we could then talk about, well, there are some Draco that are favorable. And I just mentioned I have a mantid that I work with, has taught me about sonar technology and how to use sound and frequency. I think these guys were on a team that was altering me, but that they were helping in some way, or they were, what I perceive, I can talk about the ant beings who were working at times with the Greys, who were intervening in my childhood at night. What they told me is, and this is relevant perhaps, is that they had been co-opted too. They were kind of enslaved by the Greys and controlled to a certain extent to do some of their work. I mean, that might have been just something they had told me, but I think there's some variation there, and it's difficult to lump everything into one good, bad box. Yeah, I don't think I answered your question that well about why.
Oh, it's okay. So can you tell us a little bit more about your mantoid encounters? Perhaps the name of your
yeah, my buddy Nemo. I can tell you about Nemo.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is that the name that you gave?
No, I said, no, we fought about this one night a couple years ago because I said, well, what do I call you, dude? Or she, he, it, I don't know. He said, call me Nemo. And I went, I'm not calling you Nemo. He said, no, Nemo is good. So he does have a name. You know, they don't always come with names. Sometimes they just have a long string of numbers, if that. Nothing. So Nemo, you know, I had been doing some sort of energetic healing work for extraterrestrials, and he came in shortly after that sort of chapter of my life. And I woke up one morning and he was on the left side, right in my face. And that was another thing, like, you know, Tia first coming in, the Draco, and I went, oh shit, that's not what you want to be seeing first thing in the morning above your bed. And that happened for a couple mornings. I'm pretty well protected. And it happened a couple times, and I started to, okay, just feel the energy field. And it's like, I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to help you. And that's true. I mean, if we're attuned to frequency, we can, yeah, that's much closer, but it's, yeah, thank you. If we're attuned to frequency, we can tell the intentions of a being. If we have a high vibration and we keep ourselves pretty intact in our consciousness. And I could tell that was absolutely true. And so over some months of working closely with him, he taught me different things and showed me how to, it's like working with color and light and sound, and that's what they're artists. That's what they do. And he would accompany me in, you know, it seemed like for him, he needed to have a willing participant on Earth, like a human, to kind of say, hey, this guy's okay. He's allowed to be here right now. So he would come into, like, it's funny. I would be going into like a shopping supermarket, and he'd be like, I'm gonna be here. I want to feed on frequency. You know, he just like was enjoying the human panoply of emotion and sort of the hysteria and, you know, joy and suffering of humans, just watching it and being able to notice it up close through my experience. So he's still around, and I say kind of hi to him every day. He appears in my front left all the time. So front left, I have different guides showing up in different aspects of my awareness.
So does that mean that you were possibly one of these beings in another incarnation?
Quite possibly. I mean, we have so many different ways of, you know, maybe it was, yeah, past life, parallel experience, who knows what. But I've had mostly a favorable sense of the mantids. When I first started, you know, when the Mars information started coming through, talking again on my spatial awareness, which is sort of interdimensional or something, I was sitting in bed in the morning, tuning in and feeling the energies and so on, and saying hello to my guides, my team. And I went, you know, to the back left, which is where I've been controlled and wired into things in the past. I was like, shit, man, there's a lot of like activity there. And there was a portal. I've known this. There was a gateway where they came in and out at my back left area of my field in a non-local space. And there were two mantids on either side. And they said, we want to help you see this, you know, basically regarding this. So it's a one-way street, but you can actually go into your Mars experiences now. That was this spring. Like just an illustration of, you know, and benevolence, like a real, they're guarding the gate and helping protect me actually, while it's like astral journeying into those experiences in a way.
So they were assisting you getting your memories back, helping you.
In a way, they were guarding a portal through which I could safely go back into Mars in a, almost like being in current time. Like I'd just be spit out into this arena that was a bit jolting, and there's all these neon type explosions in the sky, but I could watch from within it, but in a safe way in which I'm not participating or in harm's way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So a question from the audience. Can you tell us a little bit about basic everyday life, like living quarters, or any information that's helpful? I guess maybe your experiences on Mars, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's where I feel like I have, the mundane stuff is so hidden to me because I'm like, well, where the heck was I staying? What was I eating? Like we talked about Montauk, what was the food like? And I seem to have more memories of maybe it's the more jarring memories that stand out in our minds as a memory feels like the more mundane memories don't feel like, I don't remember like what was the carpet like or, what was I actually don't have much of that at all.
Yeah, understood. Okay, so next question is adrenochrome known about or used by the SSP or ETs as far as anyone knows?
Draco, absolutely, the Draco. The Draco Empire has created a currency that is helping to run their intergalactic slave trade. Absolutely, 100%. The Draco have gotten rich off of us in this way. And the Draco seem, in my experience, they seem, with the exception perhaps of Mars, but on the moon and on Planet X and different locations, they always seem like top boss. Wherever they are, they're in charge.
So are you suggesting the elites on this planet are harvesting adrenochrome and trading it with the Draco for technology?
I don't know that for sure. I would say that there's probably a tandem enterprise. Anybody who realizes, any of the dark forces who realize what a commodity, if you like, that is, then they have the technology to do it and capitalize on it. They're in service to self, they're going to do it.
What about super soldiers, at least some maybe through Monarch or some of the more negative groups? Do you think they hook them up on adrenochrome as well?
That's a really good question. It's like the super soldiers themselves. That is a great question, James. I don't have the answer. I don't know for sure, but it wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, I think Monarch would be tied into all that. Okay. So going on here, next question. What do you know about replicator technology?
I guess what comes to mind is when I say they put us in a program and spit us out, and that can be a type of replicator. I don't know if that's what you're speaking of, but that is what I would definitely comes to mind.
Like the 3D print, like quantum 3D print.
Okay. I would just say in terms of printing humans, or not take that back, not humans, but human hybrids and other beings. Absolutely for beings.
Okay. Another question from the audience members. Do you experience a spinning vortex right before you're abducted?
Oh, you know what? I just feel like I don't remember anything like a spinning vortex. I remember, yeah, maybe you've experienced that to whoever asked that question, but yeah.
I usually don't experience anything because what they do is they take you outside of time. When they get you, they return you like milliseconds right before they take you. But there are some. There was like a reptilian experiencer that I knew. She mentioned that she was like fog or mist would show up in her house, and that's when she started having, of course, benevolent reptilian contacts. Did you ever?
Yeah, well, and two, when you're taken at night, that's convenient for them because you're not going to notice anything, especially if they got, kind of insectoids who can help numb you and blank you and all of that while they're doing it. It's like, who knows? But that's a great question. Yeah.
All right, let's go on to the next question. Let's see here, or comments from the audience members. Is adrenaline and body fluid in adrenochrome?
Yeah, well, I think one of the, adrenaline, yeah, it's produced by the endocrine system under a state of severe duress where you're close to death or feel like you're in such great terror that you will die. That's the height of, it's like all your life force energy is being shunted into those fluids because you're like, do or die now or never. And then it's like life force elixir. That's my understanding. That's my intuitive impression of it. What's your sense of that, James?
Well, the only thing I can add to that is I thought it was made in the pineal gland, but
yeah, and that's all part of the endocrine. But then, yeah,
okay.
and it could be, I mean, they could be doing a gory extraction through the pineal too. I think there's in the rituals, going back to the satanic rituals at Montauk, you can just putting light around this for a minute, but I would watch a sacrifice, and this might be triggering a little bit for somebody, but we were made to eat parts of it. Sorry. I say that only because I recall being given certain parts of the endocrine system. It's very gory. And it's how, it's how the reversing perpetrator and victim roles. So you'll think you're responsible for the crime and you'll never know, and you'll never tell anybody. You won't remember that, or it'll be blocked off and you'll be mute. But just bringing it back to the question at hand, the adrenal glands, all of them seem to have a lot of favorable energy to these dark parties. They want that.
Okay. Well, there's a story that a lady shared with me years ago of one of her memories in an underground base, and she recalled in this particular experience that she was strapped down on a table, and they turned off the lights, and then they put a child in there, another younger child, and released some wild boar. And the boar tore up the child, and then they left her there strapped down for 3 days with this wild boar, breathing heavily. And at the end of the 3-day period, these reptilians, a reptilian came in and picked up a piece of the skull and rubbed it on her arm and asked her how it made her feel. And of course, it was smelling like rotting flesh. And then this reptilian asked her if she would like to eat it. And then the next thing out of the reptilian's mouth is, James Rink's listening to us. And so we immediately pulled out of that regression. But going back into that experience, we were trying to piece together what was going on. She was actually remote viewing my experience, not hers. But the point is, they like to do this trauma torture where they want us to not only to split the altars, but they want us to be like them. They think they can absorb our powers by trying to make us evil like them, but it didn't work. And that's why things are falling apart now, because we're going through this ascension period, and they're disconnected, but we're not, and we're going to get our memories back, our abilities.
Well, and all, the dark, if we call them the dark, I'd call them the dark lords. They're always drawing on finite energy rather than the energy of the unified field that is cosmic creative consciousness. They are drawing on an aspect of that, but it's finite, where we are drawing more on the infinite, on the principle that is beyond service to self. So, yeah. Thanks for that bit.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's not really. I was going to say, going back to Montauk and the satanic programming they first did with goggles. Like, there was a visual kind of programming that they were strobing they had a left strobe in the left eye with satanic symbols going at like hyperspeed, and the right side was all at the same time. The right eye was receiving feedback of a different visual, which was slaughter and torture.
And they also were probably sticking needles under your fingernails while that was going on, and maybe electroshock,
yeah. I mean, by the time you get up from that, all these things are just, you wish you would just die. Why don't they just kill me? But you're so gone in a way. Like, a lot of, when those memory fields started to open for me, James, I would see them as if they were happening in third person to someone else, like not experiencing it in first person, which is, dissociation is what we're wanted for. And that's a very dissociative mechanism, but it helps us survive. And for me, my healing has been about coming out of that third person state into, this actually happened to me, and then processing the emotions around it. Anyway, the visual programming with the SRA, again, was just doing lots of things. They're breaking the mind and fracturing it and creating altars. But it's again to give you that sense of you don't know what's real. And in the end, you don't know if you're real. And then it makes I would say, a very malleable non-self to work with in the child. And that's like a clean blank slate. Doesn't know if she's here, gone, living or dying. So I know that was a set. We jumped off from somewhere in the central lane and went way left or right, but I don't remember what we were on.
Yeah, well, we were kind of on the SRA adrenochrome stuff, but
Yeah,
how about another question from the audience members? Can you can you describe how Tia, your Draco aspect, looks, and what does it feel like when it's embodied within you?
Yeah, I love that question. I can talk about her all day. I think I mentioned this when we started, is that she first came in as a, more of a standard green looking feeling being with a lot of, quite a bit of stature, not who you're seeing here, but when she comes into the body, it's like, oh, I'm going to sit up straight. I got some, regal energy going here. Not little me, but not in a prideful way, but just it's their natural way. They're not filled with all the ego mechanisms that create all these like neurosis in humans. So they're just who they are. But over time, as I've been integrating her, and she comes in vocally, I did, if any of you have benevolent Draco interactions or Draco family like I do, there's an attunement that's free on my website. You can go to the web store and download that and hear some intense Draco vocalizations. It's her speaking. It's very guttural, the language. And then it can get quite loud. And she'll go on and on and on. And it very much helps my left eye when she comes through. Like I said, I've been harnessed in the left eye and things were done in the left eye. That I'm still working with recovering, because I feel like that's where they were harnessing my psychic gifts. And I still don't have total access to what I know I did then. And it's because of that manipulation in the left part of my head. But what I was going to say is she has come in since, as we've integrated into a pure white Draco being with wings. And when I feel her, it's like there's a gossamer aspect there. It's very light. So we could say we went from the basic Draco blueprint or armature, which was really harnessed and degraded for SSP, super soldier, whatever you want to call it, into the lighter template of the Draco and its light-filled capacities. So she is very, my eyes light up when she's with me. She comes in first on my left side because that's the side of me that always feels like it's in the astral. Like I just have stars on that side of my body. It's very weird. Like I'll be talking to somebody and I'm aware that I have a 3D body and I'm in 3D on the right side spatially, but the left side opens up into the astral. Anyway, her body comes in first on the left, and if I sit there long enough, it comes into the right, and I'm fully embodied in the etheric sense. Her eyes open up with a lot of pastel-colored light, and they see. So it does turn on my vision. I've been a little bit like, when sort of these abilities open up in you, it can be scary because it's so much. I see the world as a etheric light matrix. So I see the substructure or the light armature of a computer or a table or a tree or a human. So there's a web of light that is the precursor for everything. And that's what I see in part through that vision of hers. It's also very psychic. It's got a lot of capacity that I don't have or have shut off or had shut off for me in like regular normal life. So hope that gives you some detail.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that. Okay, so let's go on here to the next question. Do you remember any kind of atheist programming?
That's a good question. Not atheist, not out and out atheist. It's interesting because there's so much of the satanic stuff that's very overt. No.
Yeah, well, at least in the SSP, almost all of us were atheists. So they didn't want us believing in God because
yeah. Oh God.
want us
Yeah.
to go out and kill at will. So
Yeah.
And I mean, plus, I mean, they didn't bring these religions back with them on Mars. They told everybody planet Earth was destroyed in a cobalt bomb. So
Yeah, well, and I don't remember having any real connection consciously to spirituality or any sense of self at all. It wasn't like on my mind, like, hey, is God watching over me, or is, you know, whatever, is there a prime creator? I was, I don't know, a created, manipulated being. I mean, I did have an essence of consciousness, but it didn't seem to be on the menu.
all right. Okay, next question. Can the dark forces manipulate starseeds like they do normal humans? What do you think about that?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, that's what we're talking about is manipulation of starseeds. It's really kind of, we sign up for that. No, we don't. Not all stars, just because you're a starseed doesn't mean that you're going to be manipulated. But you become, and I think frankly that most of us have star DNA, come on, all of us. You become more desirable. You know, they want the mix of the human and the extraterrestrial. That's sure, they're right after that.
Yeah, certainly. And they want most humans to have less intuition, be disconnected from source so we can be manipulated. But anyway, so
as far as the programs go, yes, they want, yeah.
okay. Somebody was commenting, they say here, does she know that her eyes often slit like a reptilian?
No. Thanks though.
Okay. I wasn't paying attention to your eyes, so I don't know, but I think now I'm going to. Okay. Anyway, so I can't really zoom into your face there, but yeah. So somebody was wanting to know, they're going to put you on the spot. Do you speak reptilian Naga?
I speak some kind of Draco, my Tiid language. I don't know if that's the Reptilian Naga.
Nagas are the snake beings.
Yeah, it's not like a hissy sort of snaky sound. No, it's definitely deep, comes from deeper in the chest.
All right. So let's go on here. Moving on. Did somebody wants to know, did you sign a contract?
I absolutely signed up to experience these things. Like I said at the beginning, like when I came in before I was born, to experience certain aspects of polarity and figure out how to bring more light into this world. That was, you know, Starseeds sign up for that stuff. We will be born into the worst families and suffer through the worst things. It's kind of, if you look at the blueprint of many people here on Earth, lots of Pleiadians, lots of different races, we kind of get involved with that before we come in. And now, you know, to say that now, you'd probably think like half of your audience is like, well, what the F are you thinking? Why would you sign up for that? But the soul has a bigger mission than, you know, you and I, James and Rebecca sitting here. The soul's got a much bigger plan. So we come in at this point in the ascension timeline to figure out how to resolve polarity. And as I said at the beginning, you got to go, at least from my soul perspective, it's like go into the belly of the beast, figure out how they operate, and undo from inside.
Excellent. Thank you. Here's a good question. In her recent video, she discussed, is this you, a Nordic entity that claims she's his girlfriend or wife?
Yeah. I have a partner on a Light Alliance ship who introduced himself, I guess at the end of the winter, probably, Tyrion. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how has that progressed? And will you do another video about him?
Oh, people want to know what's going on with my romance here. He's given me a lot of information. And we are, you know, he's helping me heal my intimacy wounds, because listen, when you come through these projects and all this mind control, do you think you come out being able to have a stable relationship? No. I mean, no, screw that, man. I don't trust people, right? I mean, that's the internalized, you know, my small child self saying that. So he's come in to kind of give me a higher perspective and actually help me heal. Like saying, do you see where we've been together? Do you see that you're timeless? You know you are. And very loving. And he gives me information on downloads on time and time's wave versus linear time, and how to light tinker the timeline, and things about our past times together. He's taken me off, you know, into the astral at night to give me a vacation. I had to put a pretty good deal there. So if you're not familiar, it's the brief story on Tyrion and I is that relates to kind of working as a double agent. So while I was being abducted for, whatever, we'll say 20 years on Mars, I was also being taken up into the Light Alliance. And I was unfortunately wired into a CIA/DIA computer in my brain so that the Dark Lords were getting intel from the Light Alliance through me, which sucked. But at the same time, I was, through my experiences in Dark Ops, SSP, whatever, I was feeding information back to the Light team, the Light Alliance with Tyrion on the ship, Procyon, Pleiadian, Syrian, mainly on that ship. Particularly, they have interest in what's going on with the galactic slave trade. That was when I was on the moon and also like Planet X. So through me, they could get a little more intel because they were very keen and are very keen on stopping that, the slave trade among humans and also, people like the Draco are trading in not just humans, but lots of different ET races that have been hybridized and pretty damaged and also cloned.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the galactic slave trade because that's actually the next thing in my notes here. So we've already discussed the adrenochrome. That's a huge thing, and of course they also abduct humans, particularly humans that are about to die, like in a plane crash or train or fire in a building. They pull them out and turn them into cyborgs, along with the unit to feed them replicator machines and the regen tanks. They also, you have here big business with human hybrids. So you want to?
Yeah, I think that kind of just goes back to what I've already mentioned about like the Draco in particular. Hey, sorry guys, you keep coming up. You haven't made a great name for yourself in the solar system. The use of adrenochrome by different forces we've talked about, but what I saw, I mean, it was sort of horrifying. We talk a lot about, humans like myself or anybody else in these programs, especially if you're a clone, being traded. We're enslaved. I'm not a free being on Mars. I'm definitely not a free being on the moon or Planet X. We are enslaved from the jump, not free, and not is their intention. But then that extends to other races. And it was hard for me when I was working on the backside of the moon at this facility. And I was quite young. This was some of my first off-world experience, and taken into this, I mean, it's a huge galactic slave trade depot, or it was back then in the, 70, let's say late 70s. I was little, I'm born in 72. I was so shocked as a kid. They'd fractured my mind, but not my heart entirely, right? To be working as a psychic operative, getting information from these enslaved beings. They're being caged on the moon and being experimented on. Their DNA was being taken, and a lot of them were just benevolent beings. And I think that's why now I have like such a strong desire to learn more and to talk about this, because it's like, okay, you want to mess with humans, whatever, but when we get into really high level benevolence, it's like, oh, it's painful. It's really painful. It's all painful, but the galactic slave trade, I'm no expert on it, but it feels like it's a bigger deal than maybe we've been aware of. And I also think things have shifted maybe out of that, quite that extreme, from, if we're talking about linear time, 20 years ago. When I was out on Planet X, I was mostly patrolling. I was in a craft and I loved it because I was alone. I mean, the Draco, we'd go back at the end of patrol to the Draco mothership, and we were in the environment around Planet X. Very peaceful, in fact, because we've spent a lot of time solo not doing anything. And really, I mean, it's beautiful. We're out and beyond the Kuiper Belt, like far out. I will always remember that. And I'm grateful that that is one memory I can get to. But there was, the Draco were guarding their assets on Planet X. And part of that seemed to do with the galactic, again, another hub for galactic slave trade, and talking about extraterrestrial hybrids and enslaved beings of all sorts, including humans, and to get them further, even beyond our solar system, wherever. And there were also they had control at that time of some kind of portal, a high-level portal that, for somehow the Draco gained sort of control of it, even though it doesn't belong particularly to anyone, but they had saw it as their asset and they wanted to control that. I think I took us away from galactic slave trade a little bit there, but
it's all good. So we're going back here to what you were saying. So humans, hybrids, as well as clones and other ETs are being traded. So it's not just humans that are being enslaved, there are other ET races as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw lots of, I mean, I can't even remember all the different races from the moon that were being worked on. I mean, part of it was, the Greys were doing their own genetic thing to save themselves. That's, they've been doing that forever and not having a great job of it or great success. But then there's a whole, I mean, every project that you could imagine of hybridization, and it's like a chemist lab, but it was, the base was so big, it was mind blowing. And I was just seeing it like a tiny bit of it. There's so much going on and it seems like kind of horrifying. Like, I don't feel like that about Mars. But the moon, I think I told somebody before, it reminds me of some of the reports I've seen coming out of Dulce. But if I try and think back, oh God, so many kinds of beings, it's like, it's beings I've never heard of, beings we've never seen.
Okay, so the only thing else we could add to that list of what's being traded, according to Randy Kramer, Captain K, children's clothing. Apparently, a lot of ETs are not very creative when it comes to clothing. They usually just come up with one article of clothing, and if it's functional, nobody tries to improve it. Whereas humans, we're always trying to. It's never good enough. We always want the next fashionable thing. Well, a lot of people.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I never thought about the ETs like having a style thing, but yeah, I'm sure some of them do. I mean, it depends on your dimension, right?
It has to do a lot, like with certain like Greys. They like children's clothing because it can fit them. So yeah, so you might see some Jordan ones on some Greys out there or something like but also beer apparently is in demand according to Randy Kramer.
Oh, well, thanks, Randy, for bringing that through. That's interesting. Like more than mundane details.
There is also some contraband. Caffeine is considered a commodity, but it's considered a drug for a lot of different races.
Yeah.
I'm in particular coffee. I should have been a little more specific. Coffee, as in compared to caffeine, but as well, it's like considered like heroin.
Well, their systems are so varied too. I mean, you would probably kill a being with caffeine, and some dimension that's probably lethal for somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. You remember? I don't know if one of the early interviews I did with Peter the Insider. He was with the Emerthers and working in the base down in Pine Gap, and they would come up to him and says, "We want the coffee. Where's the coffee? We want the coffee." And then they would drink the coffee and they would start levitating on the ceiling, playing Italian disco, dancing disco on the ceiling, levitating upside down. So coffee is high, as well as movies and music, because a lot of that was considered very illegal in the SSP from planet Earth, because they were told we're destroyed. I don't know if you have enough recall. Remember watching Star Wars on Mars, but no. Okay. Well, anyway, so let's move on here. More questions. So
that's good. I like that. It's good to have a little laughter in here.
Yeah. So we have time anomalies. Is that something you put down your list?
Skip through some of that. It's more like I find it all fascinating. Like what I said about, is it possible that the timeline for Planet X, being it so far away, I mean, unfathomably far, and it's still in the solar system, could still be playing out. And it was like having to do with like, I started asking a lot of questions of my guides and my higher self and me about like, so, because I was having bleed through or time loop experiences where I was trying to differentiate. And of course I've got a, human linear mind. Am I still out there? And that's a big question for people who have clones. Are you still out there? What are you doing? Are you getting bleed through? How is that affecting you? What's going on with your consciousness? So I was just trying to learn more about that. I thought it was interesting that I could see right away that the farther we go off of Earth's orbit, the more, I mean, time at a certain point is irrelevant anyway. We know it's a relative term rather than an absolute. So what else would I say about time? It's slippery. As soon as, we're all sitting here in linear time, linear mind, trying to figure out the stuff that is stuffing up your mind to like wrap itself around all of this. Totally, totally.
All right. Well, let's move on here because there's so many more questions. Do you have any memories of interacting with the Andromedans?
Yeah, and that's we're opening a bit, we're talking about a whole galaxy as far as I know. I have an Andromedan aspect actually, and she also comes through my body in the same way that Tia does. And she's the aspect that relates with Tyrion, frankly. So Andromedan, yeah, lots of relationship going back, first working with them some years ago, but that's a whole different galaxy when I'm able to go out and sort of experience it remotely. It's like a watery galaxy and it's so peaceful. But yeah, I could talk for a while about the Andromeda thing, but a lot of light.
Well, have you actually interacted one in this physical realm, or is it all astral?
It's, my experiences exist in multi-dimensions. So it's not like there's a physical, like I'm looking at my physical microphone and there's a physical being in the room. Because I'm a seer, I guess I'm able to view a lot of different dimensions and beings within them. Anyway, so they've always talked, that group that I work with from Andromeda has always explained it as like, we're the galaxy of unity and we've come to seed your planet with said codes of unity rather than the codes of polarity, which we're experiencing in Technicolor right now.
Okay, so whoever asked that question, if you had something more specific in mind, go ahead and do so. We're moving on.
Yeah, is there something else there?
Yeah. Okay, so next thing, somebody says they they came in late, but they were wondering, could you describe the Mars colony program done to her through each eye?
Oh, okay, yeah, that was actually, yeah, I can. It was not in Mars, but it was through Montauk, and it was preceded the actual physical satanic rituals. I was strapped into like a chair type deal, and then metal table, a sort of combination chair table, and then with some kind of goggle type, I don't know what you call it, but it's a visual kind of programming, which is very much every bit real. Like, it's not like you don't think you're just watching a movie, it's the real thing. So in the left eye was satanic programming. Satanic, I want to say, let me refine that. It's all these symbols and numbers, and it was so fast that you couldn't isolate a single one, but it was every bit satanic programming. Distortions and inversions of creation codes. If we think about the mathematical universal expression of life that is often termed sacred geometry, that was some of it, but it's also like black sun and all these crazy inversions of life force principles as made visible through symbol and sign that are used by Satanists. Lots of variations on that. And then the right eye, the left eye had a strobe also, seemed like a blue light. And the right eye was filled with, it was ritual, sacrifice and slaughter and murder and things like that in the right eye. And it feels like you're in it for real, and doing those things both at once in both eyes at a rapid pace, and like putting electrodes on your head and all the stuff at the same time. You just like, yeah, if you're not split at that point, you're going to fracture and check out. Yeah,
I'm just trying to keep track of all these questions. They're just pouring in here. So let's go through quickly. Next one. How can so this is a really important one. How can we heal and recover memories?
Yeah. Okay, great.
Other than going to a session with you, Rebecca, you can plug in your website.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess go to my website. What am I supposed to do, James? Say book a session with me? I'll talk about my memory retrieval and some of what's happened for me with my healing path. In the memory retrieval, it started, I've had little blips of things my whole life. Anomalous stuff, like and you dismiss it because you're like, I don't know where that belongs, so it just doesn't exist. Any kind of cognitive dissonance into our collective perceived notion of conventional reality, we tend to dump in a box and throw away. But then in 2012, I was hit by a car and had a quite extreme concussion. I was on my bike and totaled my bike, and it was quite intense. And I think that started to, I think it really rattled loose some of the compartments in the mind that had been shut. So head injury, severe head injury started things. And then over time, as I started to meditate, because my life had started falling apart, and it wasn't because of the car accident, I started meditating and things were really coming in. Quite long, I'm a pursuant of a very devoted spiritual path and practices of stillness and developing consciousness through that. We're silencing the mind. Well, what happens when you're silencing the mind in deep meditation after an hour? Things you've repressed come up in, for me, with great force over time. And maybe force isn't the answer, but over, consistently in a way that I could manage and integrate. And I would remember them, and remember I was getting a lot of memory feedback that way. And I would also then be taken into visions which elaborated on the material and given channel information, but largely that's where actual memories were coming from. So through meditation and spiritual development, you're working with the deeper pockets of mind, like where we go in meditation. If we think about brainwaves and we're always in beta, we're in beta right now. If we drop into alpha and then, deeper delta, whatever, we can access other points of consciousness within us. So that's some of the main way. And I think there was a certain readiness in my journey that I had made spiritually in my healing development before I got to the point where I was getting the huge downloads of information, of memory unlocking. So now it's quite regular. And if you came in late, I had mentioned that my father's death, because he was one of the main handlers, he died this year early on, and I had a ton of memory starting to surface then after he passed away. And now things, because I'm really saying yes to the material this past 2 years, really, I have things, we're saying yes to our higher self, like, hey, I'm ready to see, I'm not ready to keep this out anymore, which is what we're usually saying to our, subconscious, that we don't really want to know because it's too messed up. Now because I'm actively saying yes, I get a lot more. And if I ask a question or I want to retrieve something, in the time ahead, it might be in a few days, it might be in a couple of weeks, I usually receive something, and it might be in doing something kind of mundane or something triggers it. But I seem to have an open channel with my subconscious. And I also work, when I started to work with what I call them the girls, my inner child selves, then again, another layer began to open up. And that's the vantage point from which I've done a lot of my healing work. And because I'm a seer and an intuitive, I see these beings, these me's. One is an infant, one is 4, one is 9, and one is 17, as independent, autonomous beings on a journey of their own that come to me. And, for example, like I said, the 9-year-old came and she was like all cyborged out in her head, and it was all like her pupils are all dialed. She's on mind control. And she just said, help me. And that I really knew I needed to pay attention and have her show me what was going on. And that, then we can get into more on like the healing journey. I mentioned I had a Indigenous mother and father that came in 2018, I guess, summer 2018, they came in like such a blessing, something most of us couldn't even conceive of. I certainly had no frame of reference for like unconditionally loving parents who conveyed wisdom and compassion. They've been great healers. They are, I met the self, the past life self, Wadena, in 2016. We had quite a lot of interaction in that year. And then it was 2 years later that these parents, I just call them mother and father, came in, and they've been with me pretty much every day since then. A blessing. And mother, has taken me out to do soul retrieval out in the far reaches of all of this at Planet X. So she said, go back and light tinker the timeline from this point. You know how to do this. So we're working on bringing light into the timeline of darkness, which I've been talking about for quite a while here. So there's ways to, again, I'm aided by the fact that I work in multiple dimensions in different states of consciousness, and enabling me to be able to do this. And then Tia has been a great help also. Me allowing her to come through has given me back a lot more voice, a lot more solar plexus energy, a lot more grounded, rooted energy, a lot more vision, just everything. And she came in and said, that's basically what I'm here to do, is help you recover from all of this. And I would say the work with the kiddos, is some of the most powerful work we could ever do. To place it in shamanic context, it is a kind of soul retrieval work when we work with the inner selves, the inner child James. I have one that I call Augie, other girl, the diminutive form of OG, Augie. She is the most damaged, and she's the one who experienced the satanic programming and satanic ritual and sacrifice viewings. And the first time I saw her, I still will cry about it. She is borderline, she's like autistic. She comes off as retarded, mentally retarded or handicapped or autistic. And she doesn't see me at all. And she's not, she's gone. She's gone, and she doesn't know what happened to her. And it's part of me, and she doesn't look like me at all. It's very sad. And she has freckles and glasses, and she's about 7. And it's just been really powerful work, because it opens our hearts to experience this in a new way, rather than it's something in a story that happened out there. It's something that didn't really happen to me. It's made it very real so I can heal. And that's why I'm a big advocate of doing this stuff. She, doesn't care what anyone does to her. She doesn't recognize other people. So that's been hard that she doesn't. She's starting to recognize me and teach me things and coming closer to me. She reached out and touched me not too long ago, a few days ago. And that was a big progress for us, but brings me close into she's a beautiful part of my life now. But yeah, it's tough to see her. So she's like cross-eyed and, deaf, dumb, blind, mute kind of thing.
Rebecca, question is this an altar or like an astral being that you're
altar? It's an altar. Augie's an altar, but
you describe a whole different appearance.
Yeah, it's an altar. But I also see her as a child me and a child altar. Yes. Absolutely, because she first came to me in a lucid dream, and I was like, oh, I could only see her from the head up, and it was very clear she was me. I couldn't see anything on her body at all, but I could tell she was being sodomized repeatedly in the dream. And then she started becoming real in my meditations and during waking life, like walking out in the forest in the watershed. I'd have her show up with me, and I could see her doing her thing. She stamps her feet and turns in a circle and looks up at the stars, and she's having a little dance she's murmuring, and sometimes she's asking for her mother, but that's all. She's not really vocal yet. So a long way to say that's an altar.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll be sure. Okay, so I'll just plug in your website for audience members. It is RebeccaRoseBarfoot.com, and I'll put that in the link, in the description.
And you can also order, I specialize in some of the inner child work. You can also order specific inner child work or Akashic readings, so, soul counsel and all that kind of stuff is on there, as well as galactic attunements, past life readings, and so forth, healing sessions.
Excellent. We'll look into that. Okay, so now I want to get into the Planet X questions. because yeah, they're all just coming in here. So what can you tell us about Planet X?
Yeah. Well, and I've said this, anytime people ask me about Planet X, I'm immediately taken into the Kuiper Belt felt sense of being out there. But what I would say is I don't perceive this as being Nibiru. I think there's a lot of confusion about that. This is the proverbial ninth planet that our science doesn't really believe exists. That one. And it's quite big, but I don't have a lot of memories of being on land. I remember being stationed in the atmosphere. Again, there was a main Draco mothership, black ship, with a big, lift down sort of thing that would let us out in individual craft patrols, ships, very, very, very high tech. You're just running them with your consciousness at that point. They look kind of like a manta ray. Actually kind of beautiful. But we were patrolling. We were doing offense and defense missions. And I loved it because I was in solitary so much. After everything that had happened, it was like, I know I'm still a completely enslaved, controlled being, and I'm owned as a clone and a cyborg, but there's an essence of finally, like, they're just leaving me alone, just get out of here. I was piloting solo on Mars too, in a much clunkier kind of craft. So also on Planet X, I was wired into some kind, again, through my head, through implantation and so on, with a satellite that was roving through a similar orbit as Planet X, but at the edge of the solar system there. And it was like taking pictures with my mind, click, click, click. And actually, when I go back into those memories, it's so beautiful, the things I'm seeing. It's like, okay, everything was really messed up for all those years and all that time, but this is really cool. So just relaying it back to me and my craft, and of course to the mothership. So it's all wired to central command. People have asked me, like, well, if you're in a craft, why don't you just escape? I'm like, that is so not part of the program. You are so wired to central command. You are not going anywhere. Never going to escape. Yeah, you're not going. You're still in the mainframe of their computer mechanism. Yeah. What else about Planet X?
Well, is it actually hollowed out?
What I saw mainly was not entirely hollow, but a energy vortex in the planet that I think is probably not the only sort of energy field or portal gateway there, but the main thing seemed to be controlled by the Draco. I can't speak to whether the whole planet is actually a hollow planet or not. Yeah, I don't have a sense of that.
Okay, how about, can you describe some of the beings that live on Planet X?
No, I can't. It's like I said, a lot of my memories are just in space, so I'm not seeing. And I think I have wiped out a lot of, because I know we were fighting against benevolence, and I think those memories are really, really hard. Like the ones in the moon where I'm working against benevolence in cages, benevolent ETs. The battles with the light forces, I think, are still kind of on the periphery. Like I'm not letting myself see everything. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think Peter the Insider talked about some blue Nephilims, and then there was the Anunnaki, the other version, their brothers or cousins, distant cousins.
Huh.
And then there certainly were a lot of different races, including humans on there, as well as the Draco reps. Okay. All right. And do you have any information about them harvesting gold for their atmosphere? I'm under the belief that that's not accurate. But
yeah, I mean, I don't have. You mean the Anunnaki or the Draco? We know that's the Anunnaki story, but I don't know. I can't give you firsthand on that. Anything.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, Seer, any other question? Somebody asked if you remote view Planet X. So do you have anything else you would want to share from your remote viewing experiences of Planet X?
Yeah, it's hard. I think I get like, I'm so in love with the atmosphere. I don't go beyond that. I'm like, this is so beautiful. I'm not leaving. Like, I get kind of distracted by it. Like, it's an aphrodisiac. Um,
Yeah,
so
but if it's way out and what'd you say, the Kuiper belt?
the Kuiper belt,
Yeah.
it's actually a little bit beyond that. So
So where's it getting its light energy? Is
yeah, I mean, it does, you mean as far as like, where is it getting solar energy?
yeah, like
Or
sunlight? Is there any sunlight out there, or is
it,
it
it
wind?
feels just like it's dark. I don't know that we are actually getting a lot of sunlight, and the light quality is very different. The atmosphere is extremely different. It's not even like, in a way, it's not even being in the solar system anymore. It's nothing that I can compare. I mean, obviously I'm an earthling. I have, this landscape to compare it to.
Wouldn't it be very cold on the surface?
Oh God, I would think so, but I at this point have no physical recollection of like walking around on the surface of the planet. We are all atmospheric protection, like Space Force.
Okay. A comment from the chat: Nibiru isn't a planet, but it's a spaceship. Quote from Simon Parks. Do you resonate with that?
I don't have much comment on that. I mean, I think
Okay.
the Nibiru thread is a separate. That's not here.
And Geoff says here, they aren't harvesting gold; they're harvesting us.
Yeah, it's more like it. It's more like it.
Stitching is wrong in many ways. Okay, thank you for that contribution. All right, so let's. I guess we can. You ready to move on?
I'm ready to kind of wrap it up here a little bit, actually.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah. Well, in that case, I mean, most of this you've already gone over. I mean, we'll just throw one more question out here for you. Um, let's see here. So how about somebody would like to know, have you met any feline species?
They're not outstanding in my memory. I've met so many beings. Yeah, it's more less clear in my mind. I know they've been out there interacting in various capacities, but it's less of my personal, like the personal exchange. No.
Okay, so let's so right now this is your website here, and like I said, we'll put a link in the description. You can go check that out. Um, and again, I guess you do sessions to help people, what, like Akashic readings.
Yeah, different kinds of readings. And I mean, I've worked with some experiencers to try and, help see what we can through the Akashic, which, usually reveals quite a lot. And then healing sessions with the inner child or some of the things that maybe your audience might be interested, but just go and check out, the sessions tab and you can see what I offer.
Okay, great. Thank you. And also, audience members, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already. And also be sure to check out Super Soldier Talk. There's Gail Gaia. I need to upload some of my new interviews, but I have other content on here, and we've got a link to different people. I just added that recently to if you're trying to recover some of your memories. And well, maybe Rebecca, we can maybe discuss if you want to be put on that list as well. We could add you there. And yeah, so and also be sure to visit Neological Tech to support the work I do, and get yourself a cube if you want, or well, can't get a book right now. I got to get some more of them in stock, but yeah, so there you have it with that. So I just want to say thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your experiences and time with us. And thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you,
Thank
audience
you.
members, for your
Yeah,
questions.
thanks for people who
Yeah.
have showed up and asked questions and just hung out with us, and thanking James, because I know you've had one interview after the other this week. So thanks for your devotion to the cause.
Yeah, you're all welcome. I'm glad to spread the information out there, and everything seemed to be in an accelerated state, and it's only going to get more so, I think, as we
It
approach
is.
the first
I
conflict
totally
event.
agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So goodbye, everybody. I'll see you later. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.